With day one of Philadelphia Eagles training camp having come and gone, the veterans sounded off in their post-practice press conferences yesterday, and a common theme seemed to occur in how they just want to lift a helping hand to the young guys getting acclimated into Philadelphia. And I rank the top 10 Eagles with the most to play for in their contract year, going to be free agents in 2023. All that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in, everybody, to yet another edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, running 4 years strong here with me, your host, Gino Camilleri, and Lou DiBiase. Lou is heading to New Orleans, so we wish him safe travels. I'll be taking you through this Thursday edition of the show. And as always, we have to thank you first for making the Locked On Eagles podcast your first listen each and every day, wherever you get your shows: Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Odyssey. If you want to catch us on video, make sure to tune into the YouTube page, hit subscribe, write a review, write in the comments. We always love interacting with our fans on YouTube. We have YouTube exclusives as well. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow myself at GC24_football. You can follow my co-host Lou at DiBiase LOE, and follow our main page at Locked On Birds. And you know where to catch us on your airwaves. Keep following along all through training camp. There is no practice today, but practice ended yesterday, and the Eagles veteran players and some new additions sat down with the media and gave their first post-practice reaction to the media, how they felt to be back, what the environment felt like. And one thing that I wanted to dive into was the message that I heard from the veterans, and that being Darius Slay, Fletcher Cox, and Brandon Graham. All three defensive leaders talked yesterday, as well as A.J. Brown, Jalen Hurts, but I wanted to focus on what these three individuals said. And they are all staples and pillars of this defense over the last couple of years. Darius Slay played at an all-pro level last year. Fletcher Cox had addressed that he wanted to play better going into 2022. He said that 2021 was a down year. And Brandon Graham, he's coming off of an Achilles injury, which he said was easier to rehab from than his microscopic knee surgery all those years back. I believe it was his second year in the league. So now all three of these leaders have stepped back in. They're on the practice field, all but Fletcher Cox, who's still coming back from COVID, and we wish him the best in his recovery. But they all focused on one similar element when they talked yesterday: their ability and their want. And that's the key, the want to help out the young guys, the rookies, the new additions to the team. And I listened to all the press conferences yesterday, and I took some quotes that I wanted to share with the fans. And I believe this is what a good team and great teams need. They need the veterans to play at a high level, to set that example, and at the same time, know that they're not going to be there forever, but set the next generation up for success. And that is one quote that I took away from Slay. And he said, as a veteran guy, I want him to be the next me. And he was talking about Zech McPherson, who the Philadelphia Eagles drafted last year. That's exactly the type of leadership role and what you want to portray to the young guys in your locker room day in and day out. That if you are a sponge and you soak up all the information from these guys that have played at an all-pro caliber level, two Super Bowl winning players in Cox and Graham, that you can help these guys up. You can help get them acclimated quicker. It's not the friction in the locker room, that weird feeling that was in 2017, 18, and 19. It seems that everybody is really buying in to help the next man up. And Fletcher Cox had something very similar. He was talking about the guys being out on the field and their ability and want to learn. He said, most of these guys want to learn, and the guys that are there, being Brandon Graham, myself talking about Fletcher Cox and Slay, have to be there to help them get through training camp and just the ins and outs, how it operates. He talked about Jordan Davis figuring out just how to practice. And that's a gigantic piece of the puzzle. To get these guys that have never played inside an NFL building, never been in an NFL locker room, to now have to come to work every day and not just show up to work, but do the things outside of the lines, the stuff that's not scheduled in these shorter days that they have. What are you going to do with the extra time that you do have when practices only go 58 minutes? That's what the veterans are there for. They're there to set the example off the field, and they're there to set it on the field as well. And that's the last quote that I wanted to take away, and this is what Brandon Graham said. He said, "I really dig how we're out there talking to each other and communicating. When you are communicating, it takes a whole lot of pressure off of the young guys." And he said, to end that, "I need them as much as they need me." That idea that nobody is more important than Brandon Graham, who's fourth all time in Philadelphia Eagles history in terms of sacks, has a Super Bowl ring, and the guys around him are much younger, haven't been around the league for a handful of time. Jordan Davis comes there. Hassan Riddick's never been in Philadelphia. Teron Jackson is only in his second year. Patrick Johnson, the same type of thing. It's only Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett, and Josh Sweat who were there for an equal amount of time. But Brandon Graham has been there forever. And he has been in situations where he's been written off. And at the end of the day, he kept working and he kept being willing to learn throughout his career and adapt his style of play. And it all comes from the guys that were there next to him, the guys that helped lift him up, the guys that helped him get better as a player. And to go and say, I, Brandon Graham, need a rookie, need the 90th guy on the roster just as much as he needs me to help him learn the ins and outs, that's teamwork. That's the intermingling of personality and football IQ. Because when you can mix the fun that these guys have on the field with the smarts that they all have, that's when football is the best. Slay said it in his press conference. It's only a game. They've been doing it since they were kids. And if you could go out there and slow the game down for these young guys and not have them look like a deer in headlights, it'll only make your job easier as well. Because in football, you're only as strong as your weakest link. Sometimes it's not always a rookie. Maybe a player gets hurt and you have to adjust. Look at Halapoulivaati Vaitai being the left tackle in the Super Bowl and winning that game. It's all about the buy-in. It's all about the help, the brotherhood of being on a football field. And for guys like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and Slay to instill this on that next generation, Fletcher Cox was asked, who's going to be the next man up? Who are you going to pass the torch to? He said he didn't have an answer, but he said somebody will step up. And how do you do that? By inspiring and helping that next generation. Packing their parachutes. When you go and you skydive, you better hope that that parachute is packed correctly, or things can go bad. And you have to trust that person that you might have never met, but they have to do their assignment to help you. It's the same sort of thing in the NFL. You're only as good as the guy next to you. So how do you help them get better? You help them be a sponge. You help them do the little things well, because when the little things all come together, that's when you step out on Sundays and it's all done. The preparation's all done. Because Monday through Saturday, you worked your rear end off. In OTAs, you worked your rear end off. Now in training camp, you're doing it yet again. And that starts by setting the precedent by the leadership that they've taken on. Brandon Graham has always been a vocal leader. Fletcher Cox, he leads by example. And all of these guys have now accustomed and molded their leadership style to where they know that they have to set up the rest of the franchise for success for the future. And that's why all three of those guys should be in consideration to have their numbers retired in Philadelphia. Slay might be a little bit on the outs until he has another Pro Bowl and All-Pro season, which he should going into 2022. And there's some guys that in 2022, they have all to play for. And I went ahead and ranked the top 10 players that are on expiring deals that have the most to play for next season. And we'll get into that. But before we do that, we have a message from our friends over at Built Bar. Right before the show, got a little hungry. Got my COVID booster shot. Haven't been feeling 100%. Had to get it. But one thing that is always appetizing to me is Built Bars. I can have them when I'm not feeling good, right after I work out, before I go to the gym, after I go to the gym, before I coach football. Have them on a road trip, take them to a concert, take them to a Rockies game like I did the other day. And the thing is, they're so delicious, so versatile in their flavors. And their newest one, cookie dough chunk puffs. They sent me these 2 weeks ago. I ate them in 3 days. They were all gone. It's 160 calories and 15 grams of protein, all tasting like you just baked a fresh cookie and you wrapped it in chocolate. It is delicious. It has dark chocolate on top of it as well. It tastes extra delicious. You could try out any of their flavors that they have, and I highly suggest that. I've tried all of the protein bars. I've done all different diets where I did keto, where you had to have the low carb. This fits anything that you need. If you have a special health issue that you have to deal with, Built Bar will make sure that you're taken care of. They have everything for you. They have everything to make you feel healthy, and they have everything in their Built Bars that will make sure that you're refreshed when you listen to the Locked On Eagles podcast. So go there today to built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off of your order. All right, everybody, welcome on back to this Thursday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. I'm your host, Gino Camilleri. As always, we started talking about the veteran leadership setting this team up for success in 2022 and beyond. Well, there are a lot of players that have been in Philadelphia the last couple of years that have performed, maybe underperformed, but it all rests on this season for them. I went through the list of Philadelphia Eagles 2023 free agents, guys that are on the final year of their deal, whether it's the rookie contract, whether they were a free agent. And I ranked the top 10 players, going from 10 being the least, number 1 being the most, on who has the most to play for and I would say the most to lose in having a down season in 2022 if that were the case. But if they go on the flip side and they excel, they might garner themselves yet another contract here in Philadelphia. And you have to do that. You have to keep good players. You have to develop young good players. And some of those guys are going to get second and third contracts. So these guys are the ones that have the most to play for. Kicking it off, of course, I had to start the list with tight end J.J. Artha, Whiteside. I know a lot of people don't believe in what he brings to the team. He has now gone from wide receiver to tight end, but he is on an expiring contract, and he has a lot to play for, not just in Philadelphia, but if he wants to continue his NFL career after this, he has to show something. With a depth chart at tight end, that is the lightest it's been in nearly a decade. When you had Brent Selleck, you had Zach Ertz, you had Trey Burton, you had Dale Scottert, you had depth. You don't have that anymore. JJ needs to come out and perform. If he wants to sign in Philly, don't know if that'll happen. I think a fresh start will happen for JJ after this season. But if he wants to go out and even have a team take a flyer on him for a veteran minimum, he has to do something this season. If not, he's going to be claimed on waivers after the 53-man cut down. So JJ Artha, Whiteside, tight end, number 10, with the most to play for in 2022. Switching from tight end to wide receiver, I had to go with two guys in the number 9 spot, Zach Pascal and Greg Ward. And why these two individuals have the most to play for? Well, J.J. Artha, Whiteside just moved from wide receiver to tight end. That takes one guy out of the equation. Jalen Reagor hasn't lived up to his hype. He could potentially be dealt here in the next couple weeks, maybe during the season even. You don't have a 4th and 5th option that is really secured and stonewalled themselves in there. Zach Pascal most likely will get that 4 spot this year, but Greg Ward is one of those guys that always seems to just be around, always just seems to find a way onto the roster, and rightfully so. He's come back from his stint in the AAF, and he's helped the Eagles out of some big spots since coming back a couple seasons ago. Last year, he found a connection with Jalen Hurts towards the end of the season. Zach Pascal, he's Nick Sirianni's right-hand guy. But these two individuals could find that niche role of being the veteran receiver in Philly for this young group over the next couple years. Both guys about to turn 29 here within the next 100 days or so. So either of these two, I believe, has a better chance to make the roster than guys like Carrick Wheatfall, John Hightower, the slew of other undrafted free agents they have. But the thing is, if they play well in 2022, can they garner that position into 2023? Ward has gone year over year and done that the last few years. Zach Pascal now has a chance to be arguably the best fourth receiver they've had in quite some time. So I'm interested to see which one of these two individuals steps up going into 2020. Number 8 on the list, somebody that I just talked about in the first segment here, Fletcher Cox. And why is this? Why would I put one of the longest tenured Philadelphia Eagles ever? Why does he have the most to play for? Number 8, why is he on the list at all? Well, Zach Berman reported last week that the Philadelphia Eagles have a 50-50 chance of signing Javon Hargrave to an extension. Well, that's as good as flipping a coin, right? We don't know if he's going to be here next year, if a team is going to wow Javon Hargrave in free agency before the Eagles can extend him. I would say that they would probably try to extend him first before he hits the market. But if not, Fletcher Cox more than likely would want to end his career in Philadelphia. He said it in his press conference yesterday. He knew that 2021 was a down year. If he comes back and has a successful 2022 season, could probably get him for cheaper than Javon Hargrave is going to get. There's a 3-year difference between the two. Javon Hargrave still 29. Fletcher Cox is about to be 32. Fletcher Cox is one of those guys that has that leadership role that Javon Hargrave really hasn't taken on yet, and rightfully so. I mean, it's hard to be at the same position and have two leadership guys when one of them is longest tenured player in Philadelphia. But Fletch could retire an Eagle, and it could depend on 2022 and how he performs. If he has a down year, he might end up moving out of Philadelphia. He might end up signing for a team like Pittsburgh, who wanted to trade for him last year. Or the Eagles might keep him here until he retires in the next couple of years, which I wouldn't mind at all. He's one of my favorite all-time Eagles ever. And I think with this new leadership mantra that he has put into play, he really does have an important role in Philadelphia. Somebody that's more of a role player, somebody who is like your Danny Green of sorts, Boston Scott is number 7 for me. Boston Scott has been the Greg Ward of the running back room. Always just seems to be around. Seems to be a guy that just gets onto the roster, steps up in big moments, puts up the most touchdowns for the Philadelphia Eagles last year. He could potentially get a contract outside of Philly for $2 to $3 million, or he could get paid that in Philadelphia. Kenneth Gainwell's still on a rookie deal. You don't know what Miles Sanders could end up doing in 2022. Could be on this list. Stay tuned. But Boston Scott has a real chance to be one of those committee guys that they keep around. What they thought Corey Clement could be. They kept Corey Clement around for the majority of his rookie deal. Boston Scott, he's an RFA last season. They keep him around. I believe he has a place in Philadelphia. If he can go out there and perform in the return game as well, he for sure has a place in Philadelphia, not just in 2022. But at least for the next couple of years until he slows down, the guy has a heck of a motor. He's shifty in space. He's the giant killer. You need guys like that in Philadelphia. Puts his head down, doesn't say boo. He really is one of those guys that makes all the difference in the locker room. The team loves him. The guys love him. I believe that Boston Scott could get another deal here in Philadelphia. Moving to number 6 before we finish up the show with the final 5. Going to the defensive side of the ball. Not on the defensive line, but at the linebacker position, TJ Edwards. Why I put him below another linebacker, I won't tell you which one that is. It's because TJ Edwards has a more niche role of that run-stopping linebacker that will more likely be in on first and second down, seeing his way off the field on third downs, getting a more athletic Nakobe Dean or a more athletic Davian Taylor, who blow TJ Edwards out of the water when it comes to lateral quickness, the ability to go downfield, the ability to play guys in man coverage. But TJ Edwards, another player who just seems to be around all the time, outplayed a majority of that group. That Alex Singleton is gone. Eric Wilson's gone. Who's the one guy that's still around? TJ Edwards. And they extended him. They gave him this extra year. They wanted to see what he can do in 2022. He has a big year ahead. If he comes and leads the team in tackles, I wouldn't be surprised yet again. He's a reliable tackler. He doesn't miss tackles in open space. And with the Eagles going more odd looks up front, there will be situations where they only have 3 down linemen. They need reliable run gap filling linebackers, and TJ Edwards is one of those guys. So that's number 10 through 6. When we get back, we're going to talk about number 5 through 1 and which Eagle has the most to play for going in to the 2022 season. All that and more to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. All right, everybody, welcome on back to this Thursday edition of the show, wrapping it up here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Your host, Gino Camilleri. As always, Lou is heading on down to New Orleans. He's going to be living it up down there, enjoying the good weather down in Louisiana. Hope you get some crawfish. They're always delicious. But we're not talking about Louisiana. We're not talking about the New Orleans Saints. We're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. And we're wrapping up the show talking about the last 5 players on my list. I ranked the top 10 of players that have the most to play for on a contract year going into the 2022 season. Number 10 was J.J. Artha Whiteside. Number 9 was wide receivers Zach Pascal and Greg Ward. Number 8, interior defensive lineman Fletcher Cox. Number 7, running back Boston Scott. Number 6, linebacker TJ Edwards. I'm going to follow up the linebacking core and stick in that unit. Number 5 being Kyzir White. And the reason I put Kyzir White ahead of TJ Edwards is, one, he's more versatile. I believe he might not lead the team in tackles, but he will lead the team in snaps at the linebacking position. And the reason is he'll be on the field all 3 downs. He's going to be asked to be the guy that covers out in space. He'll be off the ball at times. He'll be able to make plays all over the field with his athleticism and versatility. Why he has more to play for than TJ Edwards? Eagles haven't had a guy like Kyzir White. They did draft Nakobe Dean. They do have an athletic Davion Taylor. Kyzir's done it. He's done it at a high level. He was leading the Chargers in tackles over the last few years. We know our friends over at Locked On Chargers think very highly of Kyzir White. Well, if the Chargers didn't have the money, the Eagles might have the money because they don't pay linebackers because they don't have to right now. They have Davion Taylor, who's still on his rookie deal, Nakobe Dean, who's still on his rookie deal, and TJ Edwards, who you extended for next to nothing. There's no money invested at that position. And to see the contracts that those top-tier linebackers are getting, Kyzir White, whether it's in Philadelphia or whether he gets a deal elsewhere, he puts up another 100-plus tackle season, and he breaks up, let's say, 4 or 5 passes, maybe even has an interception. He could be getting north of $10 million, maybe in Philadelphia, maybe elsewhere. I hope it's in Philadelphia because the Eagles haven't had a linebacker that can play all areas of the field as Kyzir White can. Talk about players that have to be able to range and get from sideline to sideline. Well, that takes us to number 4, and that takes us to a whole slew of safeties. Marcus Epps, Anthony Harris, and Jaquiski Tartt are all on expiring contracts going into 2022. Not a great situation. When Kevon Wallace is your 4th safety right now, who he'll be a free agent after next year, he's been hit or miss, even being healthy to stay on the roster, see game time. The guy behind him is Andre Chasseray, who is a special teams ace. You don't want to see him playing minutes on defense. You don't want to see Chris Maragos out there on defense, which Chip Kelly did at a time. You have to hope that one of these guys has a successful 2022 season because one of them is probably going to start for you next year. The difference between Marcus and Anthony Harris and Jaquiski, Anthony Harris and Jaquiski are both 31 years old. Marcus Epps is still young. he has played meaningful minutes. Slay said it in his press conference yesterday that he's been behind Malcolm. He's been behind Rodney. He's learned a lot. And he has a big shoes to fill. And he has a big position to pick up. The safety position in Philadelphia, it's not looked at lightly. After Brian Dawkins went away, look at how highly criticized that unit of safeties has been. They finally got elite safety play in Malcolm Jenkins for a few years and very good play out of Rodney McLeod. And yet again, you're on the downslope here with less talent. Anthony, Jaquaski, they have to go out there and provide solid play for you. Marcus Epps, the same thing. You need two solid safeties here. But the question is, they could have multiple safety sets, 3 safety sets on the field at times. You have to hope all of them play even at a solid to good level going into next year. To 1, hope to pay 1 to start for you the year after that, and 2, just to get by. Your defensive front will be great. Your corners will be great. The safety position is the big hole. Linebacker will get better. Safety has to step up in a huge way. Moving to number 3, got 3 here left on our top 10 of Eagles to play for in 2022. Number 3, interior offensive lineman Isaac Sayamalu. Isaac took first-team reps yesterday at right guard. We know there is competition and a boatload of depth at the guard position in Philadelphia. The thing about Isaac, he's on one of the friendliest deals in the NFL. He will be a free agent. Does he take another team-friendly deal going into next year? Potentially. Does he even know how to play right guard is the question. He has to show, Jeff Stoutland most importantly, and the rest of the Eagles organization, that his versatility that they saw at Oregon State and that they invested in, that they thought he could be the center of the future, he ends up being the left guard for you to win a Super Bowl. He's been one of the better guys and underrated players in Philly over the last few years. Can he step up and win that spot over guys like Jack Driscoll, who are versatile players that aren't truly guards in their own right, but are going to be given the chance to compete? The depth of having guys like Coyote Awosika in the depths, Isua Opeta. They have some great names on that Eagles defensive or offensive line. But can Isaac Sayamalu show that injury wasn't going to be the reason that his best days in Philadelphia were behind him? Can he go out there and play right guard that Brandon Brooks played for so long and fill in that hole, which next to Lane Johnson and Jason Kelsey, it should be an easier transition. Isaac has a ton to prove going into this year. I hope, and fingers crossed, that he can do it. And if not, you're going to see the youth fill in that position moving forward. And another position that could be filled by youth going into the next couple years here. And I already talked about one player at this position. The other one was Fletcher Cox, this being interior defensive lineman Javon Hargrave. Javon's going to be 30 this time next year. 30-year-old interior defensive linemen still get the bag. But can he outplay, 1, Fletcher Cox? I believe he can. He's younger, quicker off the ball right now. He did better disrupting the pass rush. But his second half, you would say that it went to Fletcher Cox. Javon played great in the first 6-7 games. Fletcher started to come on in the last 6-7 games. Do they pay Javon Hargrave $16 to $18 million next year? Or do they want to bring Fletcher Cox back at maybe $12 to $13 million? If Javon has a potential all-pro caliber season like he did last season, we won't be having that conversation. I'm sure a team out there with a lot less depth than the Eagles have, a lot less invested there in having Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, who's in there, Marlon Tuipulotu, who you have in the equation as well, Renald Wren, who took snaps in there at times. There are bodies, but can those bodies step up? Javon Hargrave is on a throne right now. I believe he played at the highest level of all of their defensive tackles and interior defensive linemen that they had last year. Can he do it again in a contract season? Do the Eagles go out there and extend him before the year is up? I think it depends on his play, and I think it depends on the status of Fletcher Cox. And if not, you have a lot of youth waiting in the depth. In Jordan Davis, who's going to come out there and take a ton of snaps. Milton Williams will get a ton of snaps there as well. Javon Hargrave, you hope that he plays to another high level to make it easier for all these new additions as well. And one player that will be a key on the offense for the Eagles, one player that has been the most explosive runner in the National Football League over the last few seasons, Can he explode onto the scene yet again in 2022 and garner a second deal as a running back in Philadelphia, something that doesn't happen that often? Sean McCoy got one. Brian Westbrook got one. You don't see it that often, though. Miles Sanders had very good first 2 seasons. He was excellent in the pass game. He's excellent in the run game. He's been explosive, getting runs over 75 yards the past few seasons. He's never reached that top level yet. I hope we are underrating him as Eagles fans. I hope he has a good season. I just don't know if the Eagles organizationally and their philosophy will allow them to pay him. But what Miles Sanders should want to do is prove everybody wrong and make the Eagles look like the stupidest people in the room if they don't pay him next year. And if not, and he has another letdown season, well, guys like Boston Scott could have potentially reap the rewards from that. Kenneth Gainwell as well. They paid a ton of money to the undrafted free agent out of Oklahoma, Kennedy Brooks. They find running backs like they're a dime a dozen. Are they willing to pay Miles Sanders? If he plays the best year of his career, plays all 17 games, plays in a playoff game, it's going to be hard not to pay the guy. I wish Booby the best wherever he ends up after the season. I hope it's in Philadelphia. He's a Penn State guy. The people in Philly absolutely adore him. He's Lou's my guy of that class. Booby Sanders, he comes back, busts out some 75-yard runs, shows that A.J. Brown isn't the greatest thing since sliced bread, and he could prove the rest of the haters wrong. I hope that's exactly what Miles Sanders does. And I hope that you join us here on the Locked On Eagles podcast each and every day, that we have it 5 days each and every week to make it your first listen of the day each and every day. Now, for your second listen, make that the Locked On NFL podcast. Make sure you check out the Locked On NFL podcast with local experts and insiders to keep fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news from all around the league, because the offseason doesn't equal a break in the action. And right now, all training camps are a go. The Philadelphia Eagles will get back to practice tomorrow on Friday. I'm sure it'll be another short one, but if you want to be tuned in each and every day with the latest news, updates, and just what we think about the Eagles, make sure you tune into the Locked On Eagles podcast wherever you get your shows: Odyssey, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Apple, wherever you want to listen to the show. If you want to watch the show, go on YouTube as well. Just search Locked On Eagles in your YouTube search bar. Go there. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you give us a like. Make sure you write in the comments and interact with us on Twitter. We're always talking birds on the bird. No pun intended. All pun intended, of course. You can check me out at GC24_football on Twitter. Check out my co-host at DiBiase LOE. Follow along the mothership at Locked On Birds. And make sure you're tuned in 5 days a week, all from now until next June. We got you covered here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. We've been doing it for 4 years straight. We're going to be doing it for hopefully 4 more. Thank you all for tuning in here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. And I'll leave you with this: fly, Eagles, fly.